Alright, so when I was thinking of another one of these to do, it had crossed my mind that I don't recall us having really done anything Christmas-themed before, because most of the time Christmas-themed movies don't really have one that necessarily goes with the other, at least in enough of a way to do this with. So then I figured, as long as one of them is, and of course this just happened to be the first one that came to mind. And you could say, especially in the Cat in the Hat's case, it's another one of those cases of what can really be said else about a movie that's been getting, bashed and hated for the last 14 years or so, or probably more. And, for good reason. But I did want to kind of take a look at these now that we're this far down this path, and on the top of the fact that we now realize that it's not like we're getting another one of these anyway. Because obviously Seuss's family has been pissed off enough from these two that everything from now on is going to be animated. Obviously they're starting to release promo stuff for the new animated Grinch that Illumination is doing with Benedict Cumberbatch, which looks questionable, to say the least. But we will reserve judgment until I think it's like November it comes out or something, like next November. So until then, we still have these. These live action, we'll say they're exercises in makeup, at the very least, we can say, if you want to look at it in a positive light. But they do have their fans. Even if you look around, you'll find people that see the Cat in the Hat as a guilty pleasure. They're out there. I saw it a few times when it came out. I think that's mainly because it was so short and I didn't know what to really make of it, or that I just couldn't believe what I was seeing or what. But I probably would have been like 12 or 13 at the time, so I don't know. I don't even know if that's an excuse or not. We'll start with The Grinch, the one that really took off and is the reason, its success is obviously the reason we even got the Cat in the Hat in the first place. But with The Grinch, obviously we have a very acclaimed director in Ron Howard, bringing us this story that very much could have gone probably in a number of directions, but at the same time it's kind of like, well, okay, we understand. Like, I remember even thinking this back when this came out, when I would have been 9 or 10. And I was like, well, we all know the story of how the Grinch stole Christmas, but the question is how do you get a movie that's about an hour 45 out of that? You just bloat the ever-living shit out of it with other things. So, but there was still, enough of a curiosity on top of the fact that Jim Carrey was still all the way up here at this particular time, where his name meant everything. So, and you immediately get a grasp on his appearance and this makeup, which I do want to go into, but really just kind of starting with the character in general. Because I know a lot of people have problems with this movie when you look at the source material. Like when I was in 8th grade, which probably would have been close to the time The Cat in the Hat was coming out or something, but somebody, or no, maybe after that, but somebody had mentioned in class, my English class, was referencing these movies, and there was a student teacher who had said that she absolutely refused to see The Cat in the Hat and hated The Grinch because of how much it went off the book. I mean, I understand that completely because of the choices that they make. Some of them work and some of them don't, but then it's another case of, well, really, if you are going to make that feature length, and not make it the cartoon that was like maybe 45 minutes, what exactly can you do with this? And Hollywood was going to figure that out. So, Ron Howard and Brian Grazer together, which obviously are usually a winning combination. It was only the year after this they ended up winning Oscars for A Beautiful Mind, so there's that. But anyway, the casting of Jim Carrey, obviously, a dude who's known for how well he can move his face, works with this because, well, for starters, it also works because it's like, who are we going to cast as the Grinch? How about we get the guy where one of his most famous characters from the 90s was actually named Christmas? Let's go with that. And so we are immediately introduced to him And it's like, the Grinch is always up here, and he's always on his little mountain, and then he eventually comes down to steal Christmas. So the movie says, well, we're going to fill in a whole gap there before we ever get to the stealing Christmas thing is going to be over an hour into this movie. So we're going to introduce the Grinch. And it's like, how do we introduce the Grinch? What's the very first thing the Grinch does? He comes down from his mountain and goes through. But nevertheless, in disguise, I suppose, and we immediately get a glimpse of how they're going to treat this character. And obviously we know he hates the Who's, he hates Christmas, he hates pretty much everything. So it's like, what kind of havoc is he going to wreak when he goes through Whoville? And it's like, oh, well, he mixes up the mail. And it's like, oh, well, okay, that's a mild inconvenience, and that's going to suck for them, but they'll get it figured out, and it's okay. But then he sends people to, like, jury duty, but it's like, what kind of trials are being put on in Whoville? Because everybody's so fucking happy. And it's like, he's the only thing close to a criminal we have. But it's like, okay, so he's doing all that. Can't be that bad. But then, you know, he has a saw, and he walks up to a couple of kids and tells them to take it and run real fast with it. So we're getting two totally different kind of spectrums here in regards to what he's doing and what he finds amusing. That could be a nice prank or children potentially hurting themselves, but either way, it's all the same to him. So, and this kind of continues throughout it, but then his arc can be a little bit confusing at times, because like right after this, we're still in this same segment, he decides to save Cindy Lou Who's life. And the idea is, obviously, that he has that heart of gold that he's trying to hide, that it's eventually going to grow. But the thing is that we've already seen this spectrum, okay? The difference between mixing up the mail and making kids run with a saw. So he is able to save Cindy from a brutal death, a brutal being crushed to death ending here. And so it's like, well, okay, I guess he has a bit of a heart of gold. He didn't want a child to be crushed to death. So, but then it turns around, but we still know there's that darkness in him, and so she says, thank you for saving me. And then he turns into the Grinch we know, and he is like, whoa, hold on. If that's what you thought I was doing, well then I really ought to fuck you up. So, just to teach you who I am, and where my heart is for real. So he covers her in wrapping paper. I gotta tell you, man, this is... it doesn't get more evil than covering you in wrapping paper. I don't know, but... but anyway, this is just the start. But regardless of where the character lies in this opening, because this is only really the kind of place where that has a problem, it gets pretty coherent once it goes. Because, for starters, obviously, regardless of what they've done to the character, or whatever his betrayal is, or whatever else is in this movie, it seems pretty clear that everybody seems to love, most everybody seems to love what Jim Carrey is doing here. Once again, regardless of however the character, some people feel the character is supposed to be, just because of what he's able to do with this. Because he was able to, obviously they've got him in the makeup, which was that whole process. There's that story. It's one of those stories where it's like, it started off as like a fun movie trivia fact, but now it's like everybody knows it, and it's that thing that, it's that piece of trivia that everybody knows, but everybody must bring up anyway. Which of course is the whole, he decided the first time he got into the makeup that he felt like he was buried alive and he couldn't work in it. So he told Ron Howard that he was quitting. So Brian Grazer came in and brought somebody from the CIA that actually showed Carrey the methods that they would teach CIA operatives if they were being tortured, and how to endure it. And that's what Carrey had to do in order to get through the making of this movie, and apparently had to go through the makeup process 100 times. And when you know that, and you see what he does on camera, it's amazing. That this is a man that feels like he's buried alive, yet he's still so incredibly animated throughout. Probably to a fault in some cases. He goes way over the top. But I mean, you look at that and it's like, you want to criticize it for being over the top, but then it's like, this is like such an achievement in performance. That it's really hard to fault it, regardless of what he's doing. And obviously that definitely goes in line as well with the obviously Oscar-winning makeup. to where it's like, it's not just amazing that he can do that, but that they've created the makeup that can move like that while still maintaining these facial features. And it's just, it's really hard. Like, even today, this movie's 17 years old, and you still watch this in amazement the way that shit works. It's really incredible. And on top of the makeup, too, not just Carrey, but the fact that they really could have half-assed this. The fact that everybody in Whoville has to have some kind of prosthetic and some kind of makeup to make them look like that. And it's like anybody in the background, everybody has been made up in some way. So there was like no half-assing this on the makeup front whatsoever. Christine Baranski's kind of an interesting case because it's kind of like, I don't know if Ron Howard like thought she already looked like a Who or what, or unless it's really subtle, it doesn't look like she's wearing makeup at all. Yet she still manages to look like the Who's. I don't know. Maybe it's just really subtle, but so yes, and so going on that, we talk about the way the character arc we have in this, where it's like, the Grinch is... We know from the source material that the Grinch is evil, and he hates Christmas, and that's all there is to it. But then it's when all this stealing Christmas stuff happens that he's going to change his ways. But what the movie decides to do that I actually kind of like is that we plant this seed early. Like, it's not some abrupt change in him to suddenly be good when he realizes that the Who's don't need their presents to love Christmas and each other. We start this off like he's kind of hiding. I mean, it's obviously very cliche to have the character that hates everything, but we kind of see the wounded pieces of his heart that kind of are aching to come out, but he must hate everything, so he must stop it whenever he feels like he's going to emote. And it actually does kind of, and he has that desire for interaction, to where, like, he says he hates everybody, he says he only needs himself and his dog, but then the first thing he does when he gets home is he checks his answering machine. And then the moment when he realizes that he's just eating glass because he's bored, and then we realize that he actually feels really alone and sad. And yeah, if you're gonna stretch it out, you should probably at least do stuff like that, like do stuff to add to the character, even if it's blatantly obvious stuff, blatantly obvious character arcs we've seen before. At least you're doing something with the time you have, and doing your best to make him a well-rounded character, despite all of the very over-the-top stuff. But that's also something that kind of fits the arc as well, with, when he goes way over the top when Cindy comes to his place and he's trying to frighten her. And it's this case of, obviously you could say this is a different character than the Grinch from the source material, but you kind of grow to accept that in this particular story this is the character that he is, where he's got that wounded side he's trying to hide, but he's also... He realizes that he's not that scary, so he really tries his absolute hardest to be, to the point that he's literally out of breath. So this scene where he just goes way over the top, I think actually kind of fits for this interpretation of the character, because it's really just him showing off, trying his absolute hardest to scare her when he can't. I've always loved the line, run for your life before I kill again. So stuff like that is actually legitimately funny. And the giant monkey, when he stops the cymbals, it's very... there's definitely funny stuff in there, regardless of how over the top it might go. But I do think, as a whole, it all fits the character. That also comes into play with the Echo scene as well, where he claims to only need himself. And there's no explanation for that, but it's funny, so that's all that matters. If there is one problem with this, the way they treat his character... yeah, I think everything we just talked about establishes him enough. I really don't think we needed the backstory, just as we often do. It's all like 5 years later, Willy Wonka will pull the same shit, and it's like we just really don't need this. But I suppose if you want to make him like super sympathetic or something or whatever, but I mean, honestly, it just kind of speaks for itself that the Who's look like the Who's and he looks like the Grinch. You don't really need any other, elaboration on why he feels like an outcast and why he was shunned to another place. It's kind of right there. in the way they were drawn to begin with. But if a backstory makes you feel more movie-like, fine, I guess. So, and kind of shoehorns in this love story that the Grinch really doesn't need. But that's a Hollywoodization for you, I guess. And so we go on, and also talking about making things very movie-like in Hollywood and really stretching things out that don't need to be. You think back to, well, in this case, forward 4 years to the Polar Express. And actually, you can even take this back to Willy Wonka. There's always that moment when, at least Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was a musical. Here, there's a lot of songs in it, but it's by no means a musical. So, in the one scene that we always dread, just like the one scene we always dread in the Polar Express, it's like the studio really wanted to run for the Oscar for original song. So it's like, we gotta stick an original song in this, and just putting it in the end credits won't do. Somebody has to fucking sing. Because I guess I kind of see the argument where it's like, it's a Christmas spirit kind of thing to have somebody sing a Christmas-related song in the middle of the movie. But, I mean, it's almost... And yeah, what I'm getting towards with Willy Wonka, you probably already figured out. Yeah, there is... Both this and the Polar Express have their very own Cheer Up Charlie. The song where you just... pretty much anytime you watch the movie, especially if you're watching it, like, alone, you're just gonna hit the skip button as soon as that song starts and get right back to where we were. Without this little interlude. I swear, Cindy's song in this movie has got to be one of the most pointless movie scenes in movie history. Because all it's saying... Because she's walking through the streets with Bill Irwin at the very beginning, and she's like, doesn't this seem superfluous? And she's talking about, do we really need all this? And then it's like, what we established with her character in these scenes is exact... And they even continue this conversation at the post office. But then she needs to sum up everything we know about her character from these scenes with a song. because we need a filler, I guess, which we really don't, because this movie is long as it is, or like a fitting time as it is, without everything else here. An hour 45 for any other movie is fine, but still, 90 minutes would have been just fine. But no, we've got to add some more shit in here like that. So, that's... And it's usually, like, in the middle, or, like, towards the end, or something, or when there's some big emotional thing going on here. No, less than 20 minutes in is Cindy's song. I don't know. So, so there's that. But that's not to say the movie doesn't have, you know, its occasional, you know, sincere moments. It's just that a lot of the times they are a bit ruined, not even necessarily sincere, but just good moments. Like, when he sings the theme song towards the end, right before he steals Christmas. Things have to be, like, beaten down and watered down by him being over the top. Like, I think it would have been a really cool ending to the song, when he says the last lyric and then he spins around. But they had to do the fucking throwing up thing. Because it's like, that would have been a nice grand finale to that song before we went into the whole stealing Christmas thing, but they kind of have to do that. And then there's the thing at the end when they're, you know, standing in the circle doing their "Hey, we still love Christmas regardless of all this shit" song. And it's this really nice moment. It's the moment you remember from the animated movie and all that. But then he's doing his gibberish Jim Carrey thing, and it's like, you had nice moments here, but sometimes it would be nice if he toned it down a little bit, especially since we've gotten to the end, when he's come to terms with his real feelings. And it's like, this is where you don't have to be afraid to be sincere, but sometimes they are, so there's that. And but once again, there are also, another thing that really brings us forward is, Horner's score is amazing. And, it would be, I would say, if it's not up there with his best stuff, it's definitely noteworthy among them, for sure. And that's also while we're talking about the audio, the Hopkins narration is a nice touch, too. He doesn't always seem like he has his heart in it, but just his voice, the sound of his voice enough, has that very storyteller, narrator-like quality to where, as long as you don't immediately go to Hannibal Lecter when you hear his voice, it's nice, it's charming, it's, you know, comforting. And yeah, and once again, there are moments in this also that can be really funny, that not necessarily are totally over the top. There is sometimes the over the top stuff can be funny. I always get a kick out of him being his own crash test dummy for the sled. There is the sometimes there's those little things like it's when Molly Shannon has taken all the bulbs out of the house to put on the outside of the house. And it for some reason, it never occurred to me when the Grinch prank calls them. That's why Lou is holding candles, because there are literally no more light bulbs in the house. I guess because it happens so quickly, there's just something that never registered to me why he was holding candles, but yeah, it makes sense. I do like the tablecloth gag, when he pulls the tablecloth out from all that junk, and it stays perfectly, but he wanted to knock it all over. So, the scene where he goes through his schedule is kind of a classic. So, but there's also jokes in here where it feels like we were just coming up on Shrek, so everybody wanted to make their kids' movies have that adult humor in it. So there's a joke about infidelity when the baby shows up on the doorstep and he says, "It looks like your boss." There's the scene when he falls into Kristen Baranski's tits when he comes flying out of the chute. There is the keys at the party thing, when the Grinch lands outside and everybody's having that party, and it's like, when they're putting the keys in the bowl, it's like, you kind of just automatically assume, oh, the Who's are gonna get drunk, which is a funny thought. But I actually heard something else that, that might also be a reference to a swingers party. I don't know. Whichever one it is, I guess either works. One just might be a bit more forward than the other. And there's stuff, honestly, it does seem like a grab at that adult humor and stuff, but I'll be honest, probably one of my favorite lines in a Christmas movie ever is "Pucker up and kiss it, Whoville." So, a brilliant use of mistletoe there. So, but yeah, the movie feels like it has a lot of padding to get us to him stealing Christmas over an hour in. And when that does get here, well, on the other hand, talking about the padding, there are cases to where it's like the Whobilation, I kind of get, because it further shows the contrast between his hatred for Christmas and how much the Who's love it. And to see him interact with the Who's during a celebration like this in the middle is kind of interesting to see, and it also kind of does that thing where once he starts to have fun with it, it doesn't seem like it's out of nowhere when he just suddenly turns and he's like, oh, maybe Christmas doesn't suck at the end. So that stuff I don't mind, but there obviously is stuff in here that doesn't really go together. Like the whole I love Jeffrey Tambor in this movie, by the way, and Clint Howard as well, but the game show thing is very, let's insert, it's hard to even call that pop culture, but because it's been around for so long, but it has that vibe, that it doesn't really belong in this particular world. This very, very well-created world, by the way, where it does feel like we're in another world with the sets, and it feels like and like you see beyond, you don't see, a studio backlot or anything like that, or a set or whatever, you just see just this world, and they do great at, bringing that together, but there's also stuff like, there's an explosion in this movie. There's an explosion. I don't mind when he sets the tree on fire. That I don't particularly mind, because it's like the ultimate kind of fuck you Christmas act of vengeance to set a giant Christmas tree on fire. And I know the explosion is like a joke in itself because it comes from that tiny ass car, but it's like you can just tell where the movie just makes its really apparent missteps, and it's like, well, maybe we shouldn't do that, or maybe we shouldn't do this, but Yeah, they're not like as, outlandishly out of place like that. There's only maybe a couple of things, but then when it does come time for him to save Christmas, or save, Jesus, no, not at all. When it comes time for him to steal Christmas, then we start to it feels like we kind of kick into a gear, and it's like we are coming to the big thing this movie was promising the whole time. And they don't let up on that. Like, all of that is done just fine, with some of these things thrown into the middle of it. Like the fucking cat thing. Did we need the cat thing once, let alone, twice, let alone once? Or whatever order that should be in. So, there's stuff like that. And then there's, a couple of cases to where you are taken in by this world and how well it's put together, but then every now and then there's something where even in this world you ask yourself, oh, is that how that works? Or is this how we're doing this? Like, the fact that Santa exists in this world on a snowflake, way within a snowflake, I don't know, there's a whole other discussion that could be had about that. There is the scene that always bothered me was when Cindy comes downstairs just before the Grinch is gonna take the tree, and he's barely changing his voice, and it's like, oh, well, how does she not see his fucking green hands? And then he actually pops his damn face out and says vengeance in her face. Somehow she still doesn't figure it out. And then finally, the way, it always makes me laugh anyway, but when she's going upstairs and she's like, Santa, and his response is, what? But no, I guess the idea is her innocence makes her oblivious. I guess. We'll go with that. So, and obviously Taylor Momsen is kind of like, she's, sweet and charming and all that, but I mean, at the same time, it's kind of like, you look at her performing the song, and then it's kind of like, I think I'm gonna hold this song personally responsible for how fucking emo her, just predictably emo her music career went. And it's like, yeah, that's exactly where I saw her in the few years after this. So, yeah, but overall, it does have, but once again, even once we get to the portion we're supposed to be at, it does still feel like there's padding. Like, when Cindy goes up the mountain, and he hears them, singing and all that, and he's like, oh, okay, now I know what Christmas is and all that. And all you really need is Cindy walking up and saying, hey, it's Christmas, I came to see you, because I know you were alone. And it's like, that alone should make him say, oh, well, I feel it now. And it's like, let's get on the sled, let's take the presents back down to Whoville, let's go. But for some reason, there's something in the middle of this. And that is the whole her being on top of the bag and him having to stop it from falling off the cliff, and she dies. You don't need to add this stuff. The points are made. The points are made, I promise. But, okay, we need to keep dragging this thing out, I guess. But, yeah, so that is the movie in a nutshell. And overall, yeah, we do certainly have these moments that get way out of control. It makes it feel like very much this big, giant Hollywood product or whatever. But there's certainly a sincerity in there, especially a scene I really like that kind of drives the point home is when Lou stands up for her at the end, when he tells off Jeffrey Tambor. I think that's a really good moment. So it kind of brings it home at the kind of last minute there. We don't need the stuff with fucking Christine Baranski and The Ring and all that. It's all, the stuff is in there. The good stuff is in there. It's not like the good stuff is missing. It's just what's in there with the good stuff that kind of makes it seem uneven. So it's like, there's really hardly anything you can put into this movie to make it better. It's, you could take stuff out. And then you'd really have something. But there's still definitely, a classic in this movie. People still really love it. It certainly gets its criticism, but people really do take to it. People do revisit it. I revisit it every year, and obviously, there's just no possible praise you can pile on to Carrey and the makeup, and just how much that really brings this to life in a really great way. So, yeah. So, it's in there. So, it's especially a masterpiece if you watch it right after you watch The Cat in the Hat, which is something I've never done, but I can imagine. So, The Cat in the Hat was brought to us I want to say 2003, because we have Alec Baldwin doing the gross fat guy thing, and the covered in gunk, and he's obsessed with sending Spencer Breslin to military school. It's like, this is the same year he got his Oscar nomination for The Cool. So that's amusing. It's kind of like the way Joe Pesci did Home Alone and Goodfellas in the same year. Not that Home Alone isn't amazing, but just the contrast you get. Here we have somebody who is not as much of an expressive personality, but somebody who can take on different personalities and characters, with Mike Meyers. And this is like getting closer and closer to that little downfall he's at. This is like, he's like this and the Logaroo, and then gone, vanished, stuck in doing the voice of Shrek forever and ever. Unless Tarantino calls you, but let's discuss The Cat in the Hat, I suppose. Well, when it starts off, obviously, you can tell that Myers is doing the, once again, like the Grinch, we got the source material, we got the animated movie, and then we've got this. So we've got a bunch of different things to go on, and you can kind of tell right off that when Myers speaks, it's definitely Mike Myers' voice, but it is kind of like he's doing that Alan Sherman impression. It's in there through the movie. It starts to disappear like halfway through, I guess, because he got way too into it, but, and then he does have some fun with it, like, I know Carrey kind of did this too, with like one line. The moment when when Carrey's on the jackhammer trying to drown out the noise, and then we hear him crash and he says, "Owie." It's the exact same way he says that in Liar Liar when he hits his head on the wall. Mike Myers kind of does this thing to where it's like, I don't know if it's like hey, remember this kind of stuff or what, but the throwing in of the other voices. Like, there is the moment when, and it may be unintentional too. I don't know. It's really hard to tell what's intentional and what isn't with this movie, but when he's doing, like, when he does the hippie voice, when he's trying to get Baldwin to let the dog go, it's very clear he's doing his Wayne voice from Wayne's World. But then there's the moment towards the beginning to when he's like, yeah, I'm not really good with the rhyming, no, not really. And it's like, oh, you just went right back into Dr. Evil. Like, do you even realize you're doing that anymore, or is it just a habit? And yeah, there is something that kind of feels sacrilegious right off the bat when you have a Dr. Seuss character saying, I'm not really good at rhyming. Maybe that's supposed to be like a big joke, but it doesn't. You kind of give off more bad vibes than self-aware ones there. But anyway, so you can't really. It's hard to give Mike Myers the same praise you would give Carrey, because it does feel like not just does he have much worse material to work with, but he doesn't get to be as expressive, and the problem here is the character is having a lot of trouble being likable. But before we go into all that, the look of the movie might be the biggest compliment you can pay it, because is this not the nicest sounding negative review of The Cat in the Hat you've ever heard? So the sets are, yeah, they do kind of look like they belong to like a children's show, especially the interiors. But I feel like there is something unique enough to where it's like they did try to bring the Seuss world animation off the page and into a live-action world the best they could in regards to the way the sets look. And, you know, it works well enough, I think, to make the movie, kind of give the movie a bit of a more unique look than, you know, I don't know. But and talking about unique looks also, is very interesting that when you look at the credits, the opening credits, you will realize that Emmanuel Lubezki shot this movie. Yes, not joking, in case you didn't see the credits. The guy that won 3 Oscars in a row just now, that shot stuff like The Revenant and Birdman and Gravity and like The Tree of Life, like all this stuff, he shot The Cat in the Hat. So if I guess that's another way where if it at least looks a little visually appealing, that probably has something to do with it. But they kind of find ways to make it look a bit less like it's bringing a world alive that, you know, children will feel at home in as they did when they would read the books. There's something maybe a bit more demented to it. Like, say, the neighborhood in Edward Scissorhands, but even more, you know, Tim Burton-y. And almost like everything has a coating of, like, candy over it. It's like, okay, I see the appeal, but I also see its lack of appeal at the same time. So, it's interesting. And then, once again, we're just throwing stuff in. This is obviously a story about a cat who just wants to have fun, but he has a little too much fun, and then he learns a lesson and he cleans shit up. But not enough. We gotta add a whole bunch of stuff. So, we've got the mother, Kelly Preston, who works for Sean Hayes in this Brazil-like office. And Sean Hayes is the, you know, just do this one thing, or you're fired thing. And he says fired like that really drawn out twice, because the first time you didn't get it. So, we have that going on, and then, because, you know, the fact that the cat would just ruin the house is not enough stakes. It's the fact that she has to have the house prepared for something, okay? Because fuck simplicity. And then we go on to Alec Baldwin, who I mentioned earlier, as the neighbor who, as I said before, has a very weird obsession with putting Spencer Breslin in a military school. I guess he doesn't give a fuck about Dakota Fanning. He just wants Spencer Breslin gone. To the point that it's weird. Like, he sings to himself about it. It's bizarre. But once again, just a forced subplot to, you know, I don't even know. It doesn't matter. I guess it raises the stakes, because if they come home and find the house a wreck, he's gonna get sent away to military school. Just the fact that the mom will be pissed off, once again, is not enough. We just have to keep building and building. So, we go on, and we deal with this for a while, until the cat comes in. This movie is 1 hour and 20 minutes, and it takes that 20 minutes for the cat to even show up. So, so when the cat does, it's like you look at, you know, the book, or you see the movie or whatever, and it's like he comes through the door in this big way, this big flamboyant way, and he has this nice entrance. And it's like in this, he's literally just there. Like, 1 minute he's not there, and then he is standing there. He doesn't even come through a door. He's just standing in the room with them, suddenly. How grand. So, so what a great way to introduce this character that's gonna wreak all this havoc. He's just standing there. So it goes on. There is something a tad funny here when they say, because the whole idea, take notes, the Grinch, you don't need the backstory, you don't need to know where he comes from. We don't need to know where he comes from. At least this movie takes that approach. We have no idea where he comes from, or where he goes off to. But his only response to, how did you get here, is, I drove. That's kind of funny. So, it continues on, and we immediately realize we're getting Ernest vibes. And that's not to insult Ernest by any means, but take the same concept, and the Cat in the Hat attempts to do this, and fails miserably. You can only imagine. I assume everybody has seen this at this point, but, like, we're barely in. Like, one of the first things he does is he dances and sings in drag. And it's like, when you see him do this, it's kind of like, okay, this movie is 1 hour and 20 minutes, and this early in you have him dancing in drag. It's like, you can just see how creatively bankrupt everything is from the get-go. Like, from this very point, you're like, oh, so this is as soon as they ran out of ideas? Great, what's the next hour like? And then it continues on. There's the couch mechanic bullshit, when they squeeze in a redneck joke, an ass joke, and a fart joke, all in the same joke here. And it goes on, and on, and on, and on. I always think this couch mechanic gag is never going to end. Even though I know it has an end, there's enough time for me to forget that as it goes on. And then there's the moment that just kind of sums up the movie in general. It's the whole cooking show thing, where suddenly there's 3 of him. There is 2 on the show, and then 1 watching this show with the kids. And the kids are watching him try to make cupcakes and failing miserably, with, like, almost straight faces. I think Dakota Fanning, like, half smiles once. And it's like, yeah, okay, so if this is how your characters watch this character, how are we, the audience, supposed to watch him? Are you expecting us to react the exact same way because you're doing a good job of making us react that way? So you go, okay, so you go on, and probably one of the first things you want to do is compare it to the source material or the animated movie. And it's like, with the Grinch, I don't do that because I felt like they established him enough as his own character in this world that my mind doesn't keep going back to the other stuff. The Cat in the Hat, on the other hand, is so blandly put together here, you pretty much have no choice where you want to say, well, if they had just done this, or if they'd done this, or if they'd kept in line with this, we might have something. But even the animated movie, I don't know, people really want to give the Cat in the Hat the short end of the stick. I think he's really treated kind of unfairly as a character with his interpretations following this book. Because in both this movie and the animated movie, he's like malicious about what he does. Like in the animated, like in this, he's just here to wreak havoc. Like he wants nothing more than destruction and to cause trouble. And he will have a creepy grin on his face as he does it. Intentionally. And then in the animated movie, it's like he tricks the kids. Like he lures them in with like sophistication, because he's got the bow tie. Everything this one lacks. And then you've got, like, and then he tries to play himself up as sympathetic, and then the kids give in, and then he's able to basically lure them into this idea that they should do this and this and this, and before they realize it, they've ruined the house because of what he's asked them to do. But it's like, when I read this book that Seuss wrote, I don't get malicious vibes. He's just a dude that, like, wants to show off and have fun. Like, see, does this really look like the face that says, I'm doing this to fuck your day up? It's just like, that's the whole point, is that he just wants to have fun. It's not about wreaking havoc. It's just, he just gets out of hand. He gets out of control. He can't help it. But we know that he will eventually learn a lesson. As he does, all of 3 pages later, when all the shit falls, that looks like a face that says, oh no, I done fucked up. I better fix this. But he can't control himself because he likes having fun. He doesn't want to leave. But like I said, when you look at the animated movie or this movie, it's like he's doing all this on purpose to get the kids in trouble. And I don't understand where they got that from this character. So it's like when you change him this, like in The Grinch, it's the same idea. He's got that heart that's going to eventually turn, and he is evil. But they don't really change that. Like, that would be like, I don't even know. Or it's like if the Grinch wanted to be evil and, like, say, oh, you know, I want to mess up the mail, or hey, I'll make kids run with saws or whatever. If he just murdered the Who's, like a mass Who genocide or whatever. But no, they didn't change the character that much. But here it's kind of like, it does make that difference because it feels like they've made the character into this antagonist, almost. That he's really not, I mean, I guess you could say, in like the dictionary definition of the word, yeah, he's an antagonist. But I mean, it's not like, yeah, he's not like a villain, for God's sake. And I guess you could say this movie doesn't necessarily treat him like that, because Baldwin's supposed to be the villain in this scenario, but I mean, watch the shit that he does, with the glee that he does it with. It's just not the same vibe at all. And so, and that's also going into, like, you can almost say it kind of has that approach to where, like, it's trying so hard to do all this stuff and kind of embrace the evil of it of sorts, like the fact of how corporate the movie is, but how much it embraces that. In any other case, if it was done more in a clever way, that might be something you could say is good about it. But it's like, this movie realizes how corporate it is and decides to just do that. Just say it without really hardly making a joke. Like, the jokes they say about that are just literally saying, yeah, we're cashing out on this. You know, deal with it. As long as we acknowledge it, that's fine. It's kind of like what they did with the Lorax, too, with the whatever the shit was, the whole corporate, you know, company thing, to where it's like they're taking the opposite of what these stories kind of mean, and they're like running with it at full force, knowingly, and almost like they're trying to tell their audiences this is exactly what's they're doing. But they still try to somehow put these messages in as if it's going to be... I don't know. I don't even know if this one attempts the message after a while. Because instead of feeling like, oh, he learned his lesson, it was like, oh, you know, he wanted to have fun, but he had too much fun. And then it's like, oh, well, clean up. Cleaning up now in this movie feels more like, oh, we're getting away with shit. Let's go fuck something else up. He even has a to-do list in the movie, and the first thing on it is mess up a perfectly nice house. Like, his literal to-do list has that. It wasn't, go have fun, hope we don't overdo it. It was intentionally fuck somebody's day up. And that was... like, where did you get this? Where does this come from? I don't know. So, and you can kind of tell that maliciousness also kind of comes through with the attempts at dirty jokes. Like I said, in The Grinch, they're one thing, because sometimes they're even funny. And they might seem so out of place that it almost kind of, well, back in 2000, it would have, like, shocked you into a gasp and then made you laugh because you can't believe they went there in a movie like this. Well, that was all played out by the time The Cat in the Hat came around. So we have stuff like, when he looks at Kelly Preston's picture and it unfolds like a centerfold. Or, the whole... I remember one thing everybody was in an uproar about when this was in theaters, because my brother was working there by the time. He was telling me all the horror stories about customers that were freaking out because of the dirty hoe line. It's like, you look at that now and it's like, so? But then it was a big deal and everything. And then there was the whole, his car was initially going to have the acronym SHIT. So yeah, you can see the difference in the attempts at adult humor. Once again, not necessarily like they totally ring true in The Grinch, but I mean, in comparison, yeah, you can tell The Cat in the Hat is a very much really falling short of trying to reach what The Grinch did, but it's like, after a while, it's like they didn't even try. It's like the production designers probably tried, the makeup guys probably tried, not near to the extent that they did in The Grinch, but at least a little bit. But God, the writers gave the fuck up real quick. And then there's the whole mixing worlds thing. What even is that? That just kind of seemed like an attempt to show off. It's like, oh, well, we're a movie, we're an adaptation, we gotta look as big budget as possible, because The Grinch looks really expensive with all those sets and all that makeup and all this stuff going on. And it's like, we gotta look real expensive, and in the confines of a house, we can't really do that. We gotta go outside the house, we've gotta go into another dimension that looks really cheap. It looks like Shark Boy and Lava Girl level effects. It's just a whole lot of, what the fuck were you thinking, really? And then, and not to say that there isn't some funny things in here. Every now and then, there'll be one little gag in there where it's like, you just can't help it. It's like, you want to loosen up and then you laugh a little bit. Like, I always laugh when they're all talking about their plans of what to do to clean up the house and all that. And the Cat in the Hat says, oh, there's one plan we haven't come up with, and it involves murder, and he plays the piano evilly. That's just, it has no place in there, but it's extreme enough to be out of nowhere in this scenario to where it's like, that's actually kind of funny, actually. There's a little bit, the most subtle joke I think we get is the moment where Dakota Fanning's character is so uptight that, she schedules having a moment of spontaneity. That's kind of funny in a bit of a clever way. I like the Clint Howard appearance when she's expecting the company Kate's, I think it's Flowers, to show up. Clint Howard's at the door and he's like, I'm Kate. And it's like, that's, okay, that's kind of funny too. So it's not without that stuff, but I mean, it is so few and far between the stuff that is just so... It's one of those movies where it like, the really great jokes are the things that are just like one thing and then they're gone, in a sea of jokes that go on and on and on and on. And it's like, and you think the movie might become... Like, the movie seems stale after everything that came before and after it. It's like, it's just right in the middle here to where it's like, there was no ground it was appropriate in. It's like, in the era of The Grinch, it missed the boat. And then here, it's kind of like, it's trying to go farther, but it just can't. And it falls right on its face. And then it's like, and obviously there's going to be a bit of a dated quality too. Like, it's another one of those cases where they just put a pop song in it. As he blatantly tells us, because we're gonna do the shit you expect us to, and that's the joke. Or something. But there was I was going somewhere with that. What was it? I just lost it. So, I'm gonna remember later, and I'm gonna be pissed. But, yeah, it doesn't matter. This is the point we've reached. We've reached an end of the discussion with this. So, like I said, there are moments, and I totally get it, actually. The people that say they see it as a guilty pleasure, and like I said, when it first came out, when I was like 12, I saw it a few times. But that's... I don't know what that was, so... but I get, if somebody sees this in a guilty pleasure way, I totally see it. Like, it's not something it's so bad that's baffling to me. Well, you know, I guess it would be baffling to me if it was middling, and it wasn't, you know, so what the fuck am I even looking at half the time kind of thing. So, yeah, it's, it's here. It has its place right here on the shelf. They both do. So that's what we're looking at. I don't even think there's a reason to say one is better than the other. I think that's pretty clear. So that's what we have. You're going to have a nice review video coming with, I think, 5 movies on it. I will be able to see... there is an art house theater down the road that has Call Me By Your Name and Killing of Sacred Deer, finally. So there's that, and then I will be seeing... I saw The Greatest Showman earlier today, and then I'll be seeing Downsizing tomorrow, and then obviously Bright is on Netflix in the morning. So I'm going to try to pack all those into the video tomorrow. So that's what we have with that. And also there's going to be one more Versus for this year, and then... God knows what. Hopefully more movies will be coming. The Shape of Water was supposed to go wide this week, but since 5 movies came out, of course it wasn't going to come here. So I'll probably have to wait a week or 2 for that. All the Money in the World is coming on Christmas, which will be great. So hopefully all that pans out. So, and then The Post in like 3 weeks. So... all of that as we get farther into this awards thing. But in the meantime, let's just enjoy Christmas while it lasts for the next 3 days or so. Until then,